Hello, Science 9, and welcome to Lesson 6 on organization and the leaf. So today we're going to talk about some key concepts about how a cell is organized, what is the difference between single cell and multicellular, and then we're going to look at specialization in regards to plants. So today is all about multicellular organisms, and we're going to focus on plants. And what does it mean by having specialized cells? And how do specialized cells accomplish the same function as a similar cell? Essentially, we're going to talk about how multi-celled organisms are much, much bigger than single-celled organisms. So how do they complete the job? We know multicellular means lots of different cells. How do they get the job done? Okay. We're also going to talk about how do transport systems move matter in and out of the plants and what mechanisms make plants respond to their environment. So let's talk about why do larger organisms have to be multicellular? Okay. We have to think about it back to when we talked about cell size. All cell size, all cell sizes, as they increase, change the surface area to volume ratio. So remember, as the cell increases in size, the surface area to volume ratio decreases. And earlier on in one of the other videos, we talked about the importance of having a very large surface area to volume. It makes it much easier to pass nutrients inside the cell. If it is too big, it takes too long for materials to diffuse in and out, and eventually the cell is going to either die because it's not going to have enough energy, or it's not going to be able to remove the waste in time. Okay, so the smaller the cell, the easier it is to move things around. So what we have to consider is as cells or as organisms grow, they have to start to become something called multicellular, meaning different areas of your body have different cells. So different cells become what we call specialized. And what we mean by specialized is that they perform special tasks or specific tasks. So if you think about all the different things in your body, organs, blood, your hair, your skin, your fingernails, okay, all of these things are made up of different cells that perform different tasks. So when we talk about an organism, we like to talk about it as an octose, or the organelle to cell to tissue to organs, then to system. That is how we're actually organized as a multicellular organism. Okay. Organelle being inside the cell. The cells make up tissues. Tissues make up organs, and organs make up a system. So if we're going to look at an example found in the human body, let's take one that we're kind of familiar with, which might be the circulatory system or your heart. I didn't put down the organelles because you just learned them last lesson, but organelles would be things like the nucleus, the mitochondria, the vacuoles, the lysosomes, all those things. And that would be found inside a red blood cell. Now, one thing that's unique about a red blood cell is it actually doesn't have a nucleus, but we'll talk about that in Bio 20 sometime. So red blood cells, okay, will help are the cells that are found in your circulatory system. That's just an example of a cell, okay? In your circulatory system, you also have tissues. Tissues like cardiac muscle tissue. That cardiac muscle tissue, if you keep building it and adding and adding and adding, will eventually make a heart. Now, if we wanted to say cells in this case, we could have said the tissues, before tissues, cells could have been like muscle cells, but we went with red blood cells just because it's something you're familiar with, and I'm just giving examples of each level. So an organ, for example, could be your heart, okay? It could be the lungs, it could be your kidneys, it could be your liver, it can be an organ is one single structure. And it makes up systems. So for example, the heart, along with other pieces such as your arteries, veins, and venules, and capillaries, and arterioles, all make up the circulatory system. So the system is comprised of many pieces, many organs. All right. So these are all just examples that are found in the human body. I kind of stuck with the circulatory system, some stuff there, just to kind of give you an idea. So specialized and organized. As we've already said, in single-celled organisms, specialization occurs at organelles. So they don't have any sort of like, they're one cell. So their one cell isn't specialized to be a hair cell or a kidney cell. No, they're one living cell. So where you have the specialization occurring in a single-celled organism is at its organelles. Each organelle has a specific function. So that makes it specialized. In a multicellular organism, we refer to our specialization occurring at what we call the cellular level. So when we look at cells, each cells are different based on where they are in the body. So oh my goodness, cells can vary in different things. They can vary in location, their shape, their size, and the type of organelles found inside. So if you think about a plant cell and an animal cell are different. They have different organelles. Depending on where your cells are found, size is very different. Okay, you can have a very teeny tiny sperm cell compared to, let's say, a skin cell. Again, we talked about shape when we look at animals and plant cells. Animal cells are circular and plant cells are more square. And again, location is just where in the body are they? A kidney cell is located where the kidneys are, and a hair cell is located maybe on your head. They're in different locations. But we're not going to talk about animals when we talk about cell specialization anymore. We're going to move into the world of leaves. Okay. And the reason for that is because it's so important that you guys understand a fundamental process called photosynthesis. And we're going to connect it back to animals when we talk about cellular respiration, but we're going to really focus in on photosynthesis. So if we think about plants and we think about specialization, plants actually have some of the most unique specialization out there. They have something called a chloroplast. And this chloroplast, which is an organelle, is there to carry out photosynthesis. Right? So at some point in time, these plant cells obtained chloroplasts, and then it allowed for them to make their own food. And how they do that is they use light energy and carbon dioxide and water, and eventually they make glucose. Glucose goes to their mitochondria, where the mitochondria uses it to make energy. So it's a cycle that happens in leaves. For us, we have to eat food that gives us glucose in order for us to do cellular respiration. So if we're looking at photosynthesis, here is the word equation. Carbon dioxide plus water gives us light, and light, I guess, gives us glucose and oxygen. All right, so oxygen is a product. Now, if we look at the equation itself, which you need to write down in your notes, it's carbon dioxide gas plus water, and then some light added in, gives us glucose, C6H12O6, and oxygen. Now, you'll notice it's also balanced as a formula. So there's 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, 1 molecule of glucose, and 6 molecules of oxygen. All right. So this right here is photosynthesis. Now, the plant itself has to absorb in carbon dioxide, absorb in water, because remember, it's the reactants, and the chloroplast is found inside the actual leaf in a small place where the chloroplast sits. So these two things need to make their way into the leaf somehow. The leaf then needs to somehow release the sugars and release the oxygen afterwards. So we're going to talk about here in a minute the specialized structures that you can find in a leaf that helps you do that. But we're going to connect this really quickly to cellular respiration. So every cell, plant or animal, will do cellular respiration. All right. Mitochondria are found in plants and animal cells. So as humans, we cannot do photosynthesis, but we can do cellular respiration. Plants can also do cellular respiration. So here I have the actual equation itself. It's glucose plus oxygen gives us carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Now you may recognize that this equation is the opposite or backwards of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis was these guys added together to make these guys. Now these guys are getting added together to make these guys. Pretty stellar, hey? That's pretty cool. So what we have now is we have reactants going into the mitochondria, specifically inside of the mitochondria. They're being dragged in through active or facilitated transport, and they're being dragged into the mitochondria via the cell membrane and into the inside into what we call the cystae. And what happens is glucose and oxygen will then go through a process in which carbon dioxide and water and a lot of energy will be produced. Okay. So that's why we call this the powerhouse of the cell, is because it produces a ton of energy. So the reason I talked about these both, even though we're going to focus on plants, is again because both do them. And this is actually how plants get all of their energy. It's not through necessarily photosynthesis. Photosynthesis makes the food that then allows for cellular respiration to create the energy. So in order to harness the sun's energy to produce food, the plant has to be using sunlight, carbon dioxide, water, and then has to give off oxygen and glucose, as I've already said. Now, we call plants producers because they produce their own food. They also are known as autotrophs, which is a word you're going to see in Bio 20, which essentially just means, again, that they make their own food. So here is, once again, I'm really trying to hammer home the concept of photosynthesis. You can see here we have water and carbon dioxide, some nutrients. We're going to get out some organic matter and oxygen. Essentially, guys, the same rule applies for marine life. Okay, so that's what this is showing you, is that it doesn't matter if it's a plant or an animal, we're going to obtain cellular respiration and we're going to do photosynthesis in a very similar manner. So that brings us now to our cross-section of a leaf. Now, my cross-section of a leaf looks a little bit different than your cross-section of a leaf, which isn't bad. We're going to try to go through and label it, and I will also label it with you in class in case you can't quite figure out what the labels are supposed to look like, and then that way you have it properly labeled. Oh shoot. You know what, guys? We're just going to label this in class because I can't click on these because they're not going to disappear for me. So we will label the cross section of a leaf in class, but I'm going to talk about each part right now. So let's start at the top, the very top of the leaf. The top part of the leaf is the cuticle. It's the waxy coating that protects the leaf from water loss. So you can actually peel back the cuticle, and it's mostly see-through. It's got a waxy feel to it. It's just there to protect from water loss, because if we let water just go out all the time, then the plant would die from dehydration. So just below that level is something called the epidermis. Now, the epidermis is actually pretty transparent in the world of leaves, even though the leaf looks like a solid green. That second layer right there is actually pretty transparent. And the reason is because it needs to pass the sunlight through from the cuticle to the epidermis down into these lovely palisade mesophyll cells. So all of these cells down here. This top layer is there for protection, to allow light through and keep water in. Now, the next couple layers we're going to talk about are called what we call palisade cells. So you have a couple different types of cells here. So here's my epidermis right here. And then just below the epidermis, we have both palisade cells and spongy mesophyll cells. Both of them have different jobs, but essentially one of them, the palisade cells, contain tons of chloroplasts in them. Okay, so you can see here these little dots, that's where the chloroplasts are sitting. And because there's chloroplast in there, that's where photosynthesis is going to occur. So the spongy tissue cells, okay, that's these guys little here, are like pockets of water and stuff like that. They're just kind of space fillers. And what they do is they help exchange gases and water inside the plant, so the plant has enough carbon dioxide and oxygen being moved, as well as water being moved, to help them, again, to do photosynthesis. They're kind of rounder in nature and they're pretty tightly packed together. So again, between the palisade cells and the spongy cells, or what we would call in general the spongy mesophills, these contain all the chloroplasts and where most of photosynthesis is carried out. They're loosely packed with airspace around them in some places, and this is where water and gas exchange occurs. Okay, so if we go back, we just kind of call these two together the spongy cells, or with the mesophyll cells. These are the palisade, spongy, and then together we refer to them as the spongy mesophyll cells. Okay, it's a little bit much to have a couple different names for the same structure. So we're going to talk about something that I think is the most important part, because it becomes time and time again it comes up, but this is called the stomata. So when it comes to specialization in a leaf, in the epidermal layers, which is on the bottom side here, on the bottom side of the leaf, okay, we have something called a stomata and guard cells. Now, the stomatas are really, 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 really important because all they do is gas exchange. They're found in the epidermal layers underneath, and what they do is they allow carbon dioxide in, which that then diffuses into the palisade mesophyll cells, okay, and it lets oxygen out, because again, remember, plants produce oxygen for us to breathe in, okay? It also allows for water to escape out, all right? Now, what you have to understand is that the reason the stomatas are on the underside of this plant is because if you think about where sunlight hits, it hits the top part of the plant up here. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to dry the leaf out. So the stomatas are located on the underside to kind of stop too much water evaporation from occurring. So along with the stomatas are something called guard cells. Okay, so the stomatas are the hole in the bottom of the leaf that allows things to move in and out. The guard cells are kind of the gates. So what they do is they're there to help open the stomata and close the stomata. So they regulate the stomata size. Kind of think of like the pupil of your eye and the iris. The iris is either going to be really small and the pupil is going to be really big, letting in lots of light, or your pupil's really small and your iris is really big because you're trying to stop light from coming in. The guard cells do the same thing. They open and close, but this time they control water loss. Okay. Their goal is to make sure that we do not lose too much water out of the plant, because if we lose too much water out of the plant, then the plant could dry up and die. So this is kind of what it looks like on the underside of the plant under a microscope. Okay, this is under 20 nanometers, so it's pretty small. You can see on the left side that the stomata is closed, and on the right side, you can see the stomata is open, and that is controlled again by the guard cells. Another important structure of the leaf is what we would refer to the vascular bundle, or the vein that runs through the leaf. Okay, and this is essentially made up of the highways that control transport through the leaves. So those two things are the xylem and the phloem. The xylem is essentially the most important part for water transport. It transports waters from the roots to the leaves. Okay, the phloem, the other part of the vascular bundle, okay, which is what we call that large structure, transports sugar from the leaves to the rest of the plant, because you have to remember the rest of the plant has mitochondria in it, and we need to do ATP to keep it healthy. We need to do ATP. We need to do cellular respiration to make ATP, is what I meant. So if we're looking underneath a microscope, you can see this is the vascular bundle, okay, or the vein. And what you can see are the xylem vessels and the phloem tubes. So the xylem vessels are the hollow ones, and the phloem tubes are little tubes made up over here. So again, I explained why most stomata are on the underside of the leaf. I want you to take a moment to think about it again. Now that you know what the stomata does, the guard cells and all that, why are they on the underside? Also, as a reminder, organelles are going to be made up, the organization of all cells are going to be made up through the following process: organelles, cells, tissue, organ systems. Okay, that's the organization of a multicellular organism. So that's it. Hopefully you got all those in. We will label the leaf in class, and I hope you have a great day.